Hi, and welcome to this video introduction to the Creme RIFM software model for fragrance exposure analysis. My name is EJ Daly, and I'll be guiding you through a number of examples which illustrate how easy it is to use this software model to carry out new fragrance exposure assessments that will provide you with an insight into the consumer exposure to fragrance materials of interest. In this part of the introduction videos, we will focus our attention on the analysis of exposure assessment results at various levels of detail. The Creme RIFM software model is a cloud-based system, and so we can gain secure access from any authorized PC or laptop using a login username and password. On logging in, we're presented with a folder view which contains a personal workspace with folders for My Assessments, containing assessment results, and My Data, containing data for running new assessments. Also visible here is the RIFM data folder, which contains validated habits and practices data for over 36,000 adults across the EU and the United States. Some of the key tables available here include the usage diary, which contains a data entry point for each usage event and for each subject in the habits and practices survey. The subjects table includes a data entry for each of these subjects, including demographic information such as age, gender and country. And here the amounts table, which contains the data which captures the actual amount of product used each time a subject uses a particular cosmetic or personal care product. Each of the data tables here is used in the computational model algorithms to build up an accurate model of the consumer exposure to fragrance materials. The RIFM assessments folder contains exposure results from analysis carried out using the data we've just seen. At the moment there are exposure analysis for 9 fragrance compounds available here, but we will be adding to this number as more data becomes available to us in the near future. Next, we can take a look inside at the results that are produced when running analysis in the Creme RIFM software model. Double-click on the assessment and the results are opened in a new tab. The default layout here shows a number of analysis options across the top toolbar. In particular, we can choose here whether we want to view the results by product or by body part. The lower section of the page contains tabular data, with a number of columns which can be used to view and filter data. Exposure is calculated separately for each of the 18 body parts, and this first column allows us to select those body parts. The second column contains the list of fragrance compounds analysed in this assessment. The third column lets us choose between chronic and acute calculation types. In the next column, we select the exposure type. The main types are exposure per unit body weight, which is related to systemic exposure, and exposure per unit skin surface area. Exposure statistics can be calculated for the entire population or just those people who were exposed to some extent. 19 different product types are accounted for in the exposure assessment, and you can filter your results to look at exposure from each of these products individually, or from product categories, or to look at the exposure from all of these products together, the total aggregate exposure. A wide range of exposure statistics are available, from mean and standard deviation to low and high-end percentiles. In the columns to the right hand side, we can see the actual exposure values along with units and standard error estimates on these values. In the center of the page, an interactive chart displays the exposure values selected in the table below. The chart here shows the population P95, daily average exposure per unit body weight to the compound HMPCC. Each bar represents exposure from a different product type, with the aggregate exposure shown on the right. A very effective way to identify the key product types in terms of exposure is to apply a sort to the value column. This will order the products in the table below and will also rearrange the order of the bars in the graph, with highest exposure to the left. Once sorted like this, it's really easy to focus in on these key products. Selecting just the top 3 products from the filter menu updates the graph to display just these products. The graphing options in the menu bar enable us to view this information as a pie chart, or in a probability distribution graph, or using a box plot. The pie chart 2 is interactive. Hovering the mouse over any of the segments highlights the name of the product type and the relative exposure contribution from this product type. It is also possible to export these graphs and the tabular data results to standard file formats compatible with third-party tools such as Excel and SPSS. That example showed how we can identify product types which contribute most to exposure. If we now select the option to view results by body part, we can identify the areas of the body which are most highly exposed to a particular fragrance. In the body part column, we select the available body parts. The fragrance compound in this example is PEA, and the output type chosen is acute max day exposure. For exposure type, we select dermal exposure. This is per centimeter squared skin surface area. Again, we look at the exposure to the full EU and US adult populations. And in the product column this time, we select the aggregate from all 19 product types. The bar chart now shows the population P95, acute exposure per unit surface area to the fragrance material PEA, aggregated over all product types. Each bar here represents exposure to a different body region. Applying a sort to the exposure values this time enables us to identify the body parts which are most highly exposed to PEA from all available product types. In this example, the most highly exposed body part is the underarm area. If we then want to find out which product types are contributing most to this high exposure, we can again view the results by product type and now just select the underarms in the body part column. Straight away we can determine the products which are key contributors to the exposure to the underarms. Viewing on a pie chart, we can see the relatively high contributions from deodorant roll-on, deodorant spray, and body spray. And we can do the same analysis for other body parts which may be highly exposed. The second most highly exposed area in this example is the area behind the ears. By focusing in on this body part, we can again identify the main contributing product types. In this case, the highest exposure comes from the eau de toilette and eau de parfum product types. These examples show how quick and easy it is to find out very detailed information about the population exposure to a fragrance compound. In the final part of this video, we will take a brief look at a feature of the Creme RIFM software which makes it possible to quickly compare results from multiple exposure assessments. For this example, we compared the two assessments in the RIFM assessments folder. Both of these assessments analyzed the population exposure to the same fragrance materials. However, different fragrance concentration data sources were used for the assessments. In the All Fragrances Point Values assessment, a single estimate for each fragrance concentration was used, whereas in the All Fragrances assessment, just above it, more realistic fragrance concentration distributions were used. Once we select the assessments to be compared and provide a name for the output file, we just need to click the Compare button to do the analysis. In a few seconds, the comparison results are available, and we can see the difference between these two assessments in terms of fragrance exposure. In this example, we can see the population P95 exposure to PEA. In the bar chart, the exposure values for each assessment are shown side by side. The blue column represents the exposure estimate when we are using the more realistic fragrance data, and the green column indicates the exposure estimate from the less detailed data. Finally, we can select the aggregate exposure from all products in the filter to show this bar in the chart also. This is a very powerful tool for quantifying changes in population exposure, which could result when different exposure factors, such as fragrance concentration, are used. And this example concludes this introduction video. In the accompanying videos, you will find examples of how you can very easily run new exposure assessments using the Creme RIFM software model.